Welcome to the Saturday Morning Scramble. Scores, highlights, news, and interviews from the world of South Carolina high school football.
Powered by Founders Federal Credit Union, official credit union of the Saturday Morning Scramble, and your local Ingalls Market.
It's the Saturday Morning Scramble on the Fan Upstate.
It is the Saturday Morning Scramble brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union as well as your local Ingalls Markets. We appreciate you being a part of the program this morning. Appreciate Founders Federal Credit Union and Ingalls for making this show possible each and every Saturday. I'm Cole Bryson, joined by Alex Guest to my right. 97.1 Spartanburg is where you can find us. 97.7 Greenville, anywhere in the world on the free Odyssey app. I want to remind you, you can download the app. It's free. It's AUDACY. Listen to any shows or podcast from the Fan Upstate on the free Odyssey app. We're also live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Alex Guest, week 1 is in the books. You and I had a pretty good week with our picks. We'll get to that in just a few moments, but a lot of good games last night, and I want to get right into Gaffney J.O. Man, a game that we talked about last week. We talked about a lot this week leading up into last night. We expected it to be one of the better games here in the Upstate, and that it was last night.
Man, was it. I mean, a 2-point overtime win for Gaffney. 42-40 was the final in that one. It was an absolute thriller of a fourth quarter, if you want to say that. But, I mean, it was an absolute dogfight to the very end.
A game that ended in a 42-40 win. Is that right? I want to make sure I said the score right. 42-40 win for the Gaffney Indians in week 1. That was their first game of the season. Obviously, J.L. Man had played the week prior. But you were there, Alex. You saw it firsthand. I think everybody wants to talk about the quarterback play first and foremost. Javon Gilmore, new quarterback for the Gaffney Indians, got his debut wearing the G last night. What did you think of his performance?
Yeah, I mean, just like any quarterback, first game of the season, started out a little slow, had to get into a rhythm, but once he got into that rhythm, he looked really good. He was zipping passes in there. He was right on the money most time. And his stats last night, 15 of 30, so it doesn't look that impressive, but at the same time, you're playing against a really stout J.O. Man defense. So
how many yards?
277.
Wow, that's pretty good.
277, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
Pretty good. Big night for Jamarcus Smith last night as well.
Yes, absolutely. Jamarcus Smith, six catches for 174 yards and a touchdown. And I mean, talk about on the ground, Andrew Roop getting 2 touchdowns for the Indians as well. So really an entire team effort last night for Gaffney to pick up that victory.
I don't know, a lot of teams, they game plan each week for what they might think, what they might see. But talk about Andrew Roop and the touchdowns that he had, obviously a part of that overtime drive as well, I believe, when J.L. Man and Gaffney had to go into overtime last night. Kind of a guy in Andrew Roop who everyone knows on the scouting report defensively is going to be a problem, but I don't know if a lot of defenses prepare for him because when he gets the ball down there near the goal line, Alex, he's really hard to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gaffney puts they call it the heavy package. A lot of people kind of know what a heavy package is, and so they put Andrew Roop there in the backfield out of that heavy package. And I mean, at one point in the second quarter, Gaffney had the ball at their own 1-yard line. So they had 99 yards to go and, didn't get a touchdown, didn't get a score on the drive, but they heavy package from your own 1-yard line.
Yeah.
And Andrew Roop rattles off a 25-plus yard run out of the heavy there. And then, like you mentioned, 2 touchdowns for Andrew Roop. Also out of that heavy package. So I think one was a 1-yard run in the third quarter, and the second one was from 4 yards out there in the overtime period. And then on top of that, he gets the 2-point conversion run in overtime as well to put Gaffney up 42-34 at that point before J.O. Man had their possession.
So Gaffney was up 34-20 in a game where in the fourth quarter, Alex, you feel like Gaffney scores there, and that kind of puts the game away. You go up 40-something to 20. Well, a few minutes to play in the game. Not a few minutes, but still, let's say 10 minutes to go in the game, 8 minutes, whatever. You kind of feel like J.L. Man at that point loses a lot of confidence, down 40-something to 20. However, Gaffney fourth quarter offense struggled, and that's kind of what made it the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of one of those situations where you feel like you're watching it and you feel like the team kind of takes their foot off the gas. We see that week in and week out, not just in Gaffney, but there's a lot of teams that they'll get up to a 2 or 3 score lead, and they're like, all right, let's do some clock management here instead of continuing to play the game that we've been playing, and completely understand that. But you mentioned it, I think it was 7.5 minutes left in the game, and Gaffney's up by the 2 scores, 34-20, and then just back to back within 4 minutes of each other of game time, J.O. Mann gets 2 scores and able to tie it up there with just a little over a minute left in the game. And at that point, Gaffney wasn't able to get anything going on their possession, and J.O. Mann got the ball back and just took a knee with a few seconds left to force overtime.
An incredible game, Gaffney, J.L. Mann last night. A lot of other games to get to as well. It's the Saturday Scramble. Appreciate you being a part of the show. I'm Cole Bryson. He's Alex Guest. Before we get in too deep in the weeds, Alex, if you will, let's run through Week 1 scores. We will give our picks, or our picks, and tell you how we did after this, but I may stop you once or twice. But Scores from Week 1. Here's Alex Guest with a full recap. What is it, 32 games?
32 games in the coverage area last night.
32 games, and Saturday Scramble, it's the place to get you caught up on what happened last night in high school football. Here are all 32 scores.
Yeah, Wren gets a big win, 55-7 at Easley. Riverside pulls out a big victory over Greenville, 42-26. Greenwood travels down to Beaufort last night, go about as far south in the state as you could possibly go, and they get a win, 37-18 over Beaufort. Hillcrest, big home victory over Clover, 55-20. We just mentioned it. Gaffney defeats J.O. Mann, 42-40 in overtime. Boiling Springs knocks off Malden, 31-12. Woodmont, a 31-21 winner over Seneca. The game you were covering last night, Cole Irmo defeats Burns, 35-27. Grayson, Georgia had a 53-0 lead over Dorman at halftime, and they held on to win.
Held on.
53-0.
Held on, right? Held on to win. Key word there.
Held on to win.
Wow. Real quick on that. Grayson's, they're a next level type team. Like they are, there's a lot of D1 guys on that football team, and you see that score 53. Is that right? 53-0. Yeah. Dorman losing. You don't see Dorman getting shut out like that. You're not, at least you're not used to it. You usually don't expect it. And again, Grayson's really, really good. So tough one for Dorman last night, but you knew that when you scheduled them. So you can't really feel bad. Like, when you schedule those guys, you're going to be in for a tough night.
Yeah, and you talk about it. I mean, Grayson, they played a televised game against a team out of Alabama last week that I had a chance to kind of catch some of. And, you look at it, and both of those teams, honestly, the Grayson and the team they played out of Alabama, you looked like you were watching a college game.
Sure.
Because those guys are, like you said, D1 talent, and they look it too.
Whew.
So
that's a tough one. 53-0 last night, Grayson over Dorman.
Another shutout last night. Eastside defeats Carolina 27-0. Dutch Fork gets redemption from their loss to Spartanburg last year, 24-7 at Spartanburg last night.
I'll say that. I'll say this about that game. Obviously, not the outcome you wanted for Spartanburg, but the way that you're able to hang in with a really good Dutch Fork team, to me, says a lot about Spartanburg's defense.
Yep.
And this Dutch Fork team this year, man, they returned a lot. Especially at the quarterback position. They're a good team, and I know. Listen, I'm not in the moral victory conversation. I don't like moral victories, but I'll tell you this: Spartanburg played a good game last night, only allowing 3 touchdowns for Dutch Fork. If you'd have told me that going in, I said, "Man, Spartanburg has a chance." And then on the flip side, obviously, Dutch Fork defensively very good, only holding Spartanburg to a touchdown, but closer than I expected. I picked Dutch Fork, but maybe a little closer than I expected.
Yeah, I agree with you, Cole. I thought that maybe it would, 24-7. That's only two and a half. I mean, I guess technically 3 scores, but I thought that it might have been a little bit more of a larger victory for Dutch Fork.
So impressive for Spartanburg to keep that. We'll see. Spartanburg, I think, will be a good team. I think Mark Hodge has those guys going in the right direction.
Yeah. Blue Ridge defeats Wade Hampton 21-14. Emerald blanks Travelers Rest 38-0. Woodruff a 30-27 winner at Fountain Inn. Clinton gets a 35-8 win over Lawrence. Liberty 34-14 over Southside. Landrum defeats Berea 46-6. Daniel knocks off Stratford on Thursday night 52-36. Belton Honeypath a 37-7 winner over Greer. Walhalla 49-16 defeating Pickens. Palmetto gets a 34-28 win over Crescent. Pendleton 12-8 winners over Keenan. West Oak 62-14 over Clear Dot Charter. Clear Dot Charter. Yeah.
That's a new one.
Asheville School comes down and blanks Christ Church 42-0.
What am I doing wrong here? I've picked Christ Church 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
And I've been burned twice. They've got a lot of the same guys back at 2 weeks in a row, Alex. They have been beaten. And, man, I don't know. I'm not saying hit the panic button on Christ Church, but goodness gracious, they have lost badly 2 weeks in a row. It's been blowouts. Yeah, that they have. And I was talking to my wife last night about this game. She grew up going through kind of that independent SCISA, North Carolina Independent Association. She went to one of those schools, and I mentioned it to her, and she said, well, yeah, Asheville School's pretty good at athletics. And I didn't know that. Yeah. I'm sitting there looking at Asheville School. I'm like, who's that? No offense to them, but 42-0 winners over Christ Church. They must be pretty decent at football. Tough start for Quinn Hatfield and those guys.
Yep. Abbeville knocks off Powdersville in the highest scoring game of the night. I think 53-43 is the final, and I think we may have a guest from Powdersville later on.
Yeah, Robert Muster, the head football coach of Powdersville in his 13th season. You said it a few weeks ago, the only coach Powdersville has ever had, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Alex, he will join us today in person here at Ingalls at 9 a.m. 96 points scored in that game last night. Not a bad night for the clock operator.
Not to be confused with the 96 high school.
Right, right. That's a lot of points. Only 4 more to hit the triple-digit mark.
And wrap it up here, Mountain View defeats Southside Christian 49-7 to go 2-0 in their inaugural season. Chapman knocks off St. Joe's 35-21. Broome a 34-27 winner over Chesney. Fairfield Central 52-6 over Union County. Dixie 34-24 over Fox Creek. 96, speaking of, 41-30 winners over Ware Shoals, and Whitmire knocks off Spartanburg Christian 30-21.
All right, let's get to our weekly picks. You and I both, I don't know how. How did we both end up with the same record? I mean, are you cheating? Are you copying mine, Alex? Guess 40-13 is my season record, but last night you and I both went, 21-6?
Both went 21-6 last night, and I'll tell you how we did it. It's because you send in your picks. You send your picks to me. I want to at least make sure that we're not picking the same exact games.
Why?
So I change it up because then it's not fun. And then you know how this happens, and I don't get to explain it to you on Saturday morning.
All right, so here's where I went wrong. I went 21-6 last night. I have a 40-13 record on the season, 75% win rate. Not bad, not great. Well, it's very good. I'm a perfectionist, and I'm mad about 2 in particular last night. Where I went wrong last night, Riverside Greenville. I picked Greenville. I was impressed with what they did against Dorman. Obviously, I put too much stock into that. Riverside had a very impressive win that you just talked about a minute ago, so I got that one wrong. Seneca Woodmont. Seneca, same situation. Week 0, really impressive. I said, maybe the Wildcats have something going. Nope, Woodmont got him. I was wrong there. Travelers Rest, Emerald. I picked TR. Chris Goodman, those guys came on the show last week. I was confident in Travelers Rest. You picked Emerald. Emerald won that game, so that was my third one that I got wrong. Crescent over who'd they play? Palmetto. I picked Crescent. You picked Crescent. Palmetto won, so we both got that one wrong.
Yep.
Christ Church. I picked Christ Church. Asheville School, as you said, absolutely laid it on them last night. So that was my 5th. And then on my 6th loss last night was St. Joseph's at Chapman. I picked St. Joe's yesterday over Chapman, and boy, did I hear about it. St. Joe's St. Joe's lost last night. The Chapman Panthers got a big win at home to get their first one of the season. St. Joe's, we talked to Eric Nash yesterday on the program at Wire to Wire, and, that triple option style offense that Walford used to run, Chapman just out-athleted them last night, had the better athletes, and was able to – it was 21-21 last time I checked on it, and then all of a sudden it looked as if Chapman went up one touchdown, and, St. Joe's gets the ball back, 3 and out, I believe, and then Chapman goes up 2 scores, and that was the final. But a big win for the Chapman Panthers, getting their first win of the season. They have a very tough non-region schedule this year, but a big win for Harry Cabanis and the boys at Chapman last night. All right, we're going to take a break, come back, continue the conversation. On the other side, we'll take your thoughts, phone calls, text messages. If you were at a game last night and want to get in on the conversation, you can do so, 71307. Start your text with the word fan. We're also live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll continue highlighting the biggest games from last night as well as your thoughts. This is the Saturday Morning Scramble right here on the Fan Upstate.
all-day freshness.
This is the Saturday Morning Scramble, powered by Founders Federal Credit Union and your local Ingalls Market.
This is the Fan Upstate, 97.7 FM Greenville, 97.1 FM Spartanburg.
Streaming everywhere on the Odyssey app.
A couple of texts and comments that we will get to, but Alex, during the break, we had to do a recount. The votes were miscalculated. I mean, you might as well run the election with your voting tally.
I was trying to steal the election.
You were trying to steal the win last night. Thanks to Brock Kamrick, play-by-play voice of the Gaffney Indians on WZZQ. Seneca, he caught this. Seneca won last night, and they beat Crescent. Is that right?
No, Woodmont.
Woodmont. Sorry. Woodmont. Seneca beat Woodmont last night, and I'm looking for it 31-21.
31-21,
if I'm not mistaken,
yep.
31-21, Seneca over Woodmont. So we did have that score incorrect, and that means that I went 22-5 last night.
Yep.
Not bad. Still upset about a few of those lines. It's not perfect. 22-5 on my week one predictions. That puts me at 41-12 on the season, 77.36 win rate. Again, 22-5. Alex, 20-7 for you. Thank you, Brock Kamrick, for pointing that out, that Seneca did win, a big win for the Wildcats of Seneca last night. All right, a couple of texts, and then I did want to get to this message on the stream. Pac-Man on X said Chapman had 2 fumbles within the 10-yard line that could have put the game away in the second half. St. Joe's fought back and kept it close. Chapman leaned on the offensive line, and they moved the ball really well. Justin Dawkins had 4 or 5 touchdowns for Chapman. I think they were all rushing. Appreciate that comment on the Twitter stream, X stream, whatever you want to call it, Pac-Man. Appreciate you listening to the program. Big win for Chapman last night over St. Joe's. We talked about that one. And St. Joe's tricky style offense. Chapman was able to take the lead in the second half. Texter from the 706 chimes in. What's the climate for the head coach at Burns? Texter asked. Well, obviously, you never want to start 2-0 or 0-2 on the season, rather. But let's get into that game. To answer your question, Burns looked a lot better in week 1 than they did week 0. Alex, a game that you heard right here on the Fan Upstate, I had to call for you on that one. Burns at Irmo last night, a very good football game. And I'll tell you this, a lot of credit to Irmo. That is a really, really good football team. Aaron Brand, the coach's son, is a fantastic quarterback. They've got dudes all over the field, and that's one of the better football games that I saw last night. And I tell you, man, it was Irmo's for real. Irmo's for real. But on the Burns side of things, they put Kane Rogers in. After last week, having Zy Landrum go down, they throw Kane Rogers in this week. And, man, in his first start, he absolutely balled out last night. A very impressive win for Irmo. But Burns kept it close the entire game. Kane Rogers, a quarterback that hasn't seen a lot of meaningful snaps, 34 of 27 last night, 4 touchdowns, 289 yards. Talik Dawkins, 8 receptions for 106 yards for the Rebels. Talik Dawkins and Kane Rogers were both incredible. Aaron Brand of Irmo, Anton Jones Jr., and Donovan Murph, Malik Miller, they have a lot of talent. That is an Irmo team last year, Alex, that was a game away from playing for the state championship. They lost to South Florence in the lower state championship, who went on to lose to West Side in the state title game in 4A last year. Aaron Brand, the head coach, does a fantastic job at Irmo. Obviously, Burns doesn't want to start 0-2, but now I think you have your quarterback. I think you found your quarterback last night if you're Burns and Kane Rogers, and he played an exceptional game last night. Obviously, a few mistakes as a guy who hasn't seen a lot of meaningful snaps, but he's, again, a shorter quarterback, not a big, stocky guy, short, kind of smaller type quarterback, but, man, he plays with a lot of heart. I was surprised that Burns played as well as they did against Irmo. Irmo had a chance in that game, Alex. They were up big, and Irmo had a chance to kind of open the doors, if you will. They didn't. Burns came back and made it a game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and, you mentioned it. Burns, they're at a point now where feel like they found their quarterback. It's a really good point in the season for them because now you're headed into a bye week.
That's right.
And then you've got Greer coming back on the backside of that bye week. So, it's really good chance for Burns to really kind of find their rhythm now over these next 2 weeks before heading into region play. But, just looked like an all-out excellent game to watch and to be at last night. I think I saw it was 27-7 or 28-7 at one point.
Yeah,
for
like I said, Irmo had a chance to really blow it over.
Burns really fought and clawed their way back there in the second half and made it a game.
Burns scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And like you said, really made it a game. Just played a fantastic second half. And a team that, man, in week 0 has faced a lot of adversity already. One of their best defensive players is done for the season. Trey Segura, the running back, he's out for quite some time. So they don't have, their full stable of horses. Last week, Zy Landrum goes down. He didn't play last night. He was the starter last week. But I think it's very clear and very evident that Kane Rogers is the quarterback for the Burns Rebels. I do think Zy Landrum will see the field. He's too good of an athlete not to see the field, whether that be at a receiver role or where they decide to put him. He's a fantastic athlete, is Zy Landrum. However, from the passing standpoint, I think Kane Rogers showed last night that he is able to distribute the ball in a lot better of a way. And Burns, again, you mentioned it, they have a bye next week. It'll be interesting to see how they respond. Greer, then Wade Hampton, then Dorman. So a couple of winnable games on the front of that, and then they'll get into the heavy of region play, if you will, Alex. So Burns game last night, a good game. Obviously, you heard that one right here on the Fan Upstate. I was there for that one. What game last night, when you look at the scores, what game really surprised you the most?
We talked about it during the break. I think the final of the Dorman-Grayson game surprised me a good bit. I think a big surprise also was probably the Emerald Travelers Rest final.
Yeah, got that one wrong.
Even though I picked Emerald, that was just kind of one of those, I'm just going to go against what you're saying. Overall, everything kind of, for the most part, played out like I expected it to.
Yeah. There were some surprises. I think for me, the biggest surprise was seeing Riverside handle Greenville the way that they did. Matthew Rochester and those guys deserve a lot of credit. A fantastic win for them last night over Greenville. And again, it's hard early in the season to figure out how to gauge teams based on one game, two games, right? For example, last week, Dorman, Greenville. Dorman goes up on them in the first half. Looks like they're fixing to blow the doors off. Second half, Greenville comes out, takes the lead. Dorman ends up winning. So then this week, Greenville, high on Greenville, played a really good game, had a really good quarterback. Dorman looked good as well, but both teams go into week 1 and they lose. Greenville, obviously a much different situation for Dorman going down to Grayson. But Greenville, Riverside, I picked Greenville, and then I was talking with our buddy Trey Stewart yesterday of the Greer Sports Star, and look, he told me that Riverside skill position-wise, they're the better team. And I think I realized early last night when Riverside took the lead, but man, they are Riverside's not a bad football team this year. So hats off to Matthew Rochester and those guys at Riverside last night. Let's see, Boiling Springs, Malden, I kind of thought would be, Alex, it was a little closer than I anticipated. Still a win. They'll take it. They're 2-0. They're a really good team. I did think, though, on the final, when you look at Boiling Springs, Malden, that it might be a little bit more of a blowout.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. 31-12. Considering what Boiling Springs did with their game against Greer last week and just kind of the absolute domination. Here's the thing. A win is a win.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Boiling Springs sitting there at 2-0, they are able to boast that right now. And, I think I saw Matt Rill, their head coach, he even posted 2-0. 2-0. That's all that matters. And we're heading into next week. We're undefeated 2-0. That's all that matters. But I agree with you. I think the 31-12, a little bit closer than I expected. Boiling Springs has a dominant team.
They do.
And Malden, no offense to Malden, but they've not won a game since 2022, I believe.
Ooh.
So,
Yeah, they're a program that struggled. Yeah. They've really struggled as of late. And, again, you said it, Boiling Springs is 2-0, and that's what matters. They have Chapman this week. I believe that game is at Chapman on Friday night, so that one should be an interesting matchup there for the Panthers and the Bulldogs. We talked about Spartanburg, Dutch Fork briefly. Spartanburg, their defense is obviously in a good spot. Holding Dutch Fork to 24, I think that's a big performance. When you look at the schedule they've played, Alex, with South Point, Dutch Fork, you got to kind of feel like Mark Hodge is doing this in a way that sets his team up when region play comes around, that he'll be able to go against the Gaffney's Bowling Springs, because last year they were 6-6, right? Not the season they were wanting. But I do think that expectations for Mark Hodge this season are higher because he's been there now for a few years, and I think that it's time to go out and beat the Gaffney, go out and beat the Burns. They've beaten Burns here over the last few years, but in order to take that next step as the head coach of Spartanburg, you got to have a solid defense. You got to get Spartanburg back on the right track, and I certainly think Mark Hodge is doing that.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about their schedule. I mean, realistically, doesn't really get easier this week before heading into their bye week. They're on the road at Broome. So, you mentioned it. At South Point last week, they've got Dutch Fork last night, and then Broome next week. Yeah, it really does seem like they're kind of prepping for what could be and what typically is a very tough region schedule. And I mean, that's not nicknamed or dubbed the Black and Blue region by a lot of folks, a lot of talking heads in South Carolina, just for any reason. He actually is headed into kind of a gauntlet of a region schedule.
One that I found fascinating last night, I talked about this one during the week. Looking forward to this game a little bit more than others. Woodruff Fountain Inn last night, Alex, 30-27 win. Brett Sloan and the Wolverines now open the season 2-0.
Yeah.
A very impressive first 2 weeks, in my opinion, for Brett Sloan and that Woodruff team. Surprising me last week in the way that they won, scoring as many points as they did. 70 points, I believe, now scored in 2 weeks, back-to-back games. Maybe a little more than 70. I can't remember what the score was last
70.
week.
Yep.
So a big win for Woodruff. Fountain Inn's a good team, though. You saw them last week. They've got a good quarterback. Finally have a full class. And I said going in there might be a lot of points scored last night. That one seemed 3-point game. Woodruff 30, Fountain Inn 27. That seemed like one of the better ones of the night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're right. You're right on the money at 70 points that Woodruff has scored. It was a 40-36 win last week over Clinton, 30-27 last night over Fountain Inn, like you mentioned. But I mean, where does giving up as many points as they have so far kind of come into play? Because it really seems like they're having to score 30-plus points to win ball games now, or is that just kind of a misconception of what you're seeing on paper? So, I mean, yes, Fountain Inn, really good team last week. Again, still a program that's in its infancy. It's
third year, right?
Third year, and Brett Nichols, a former offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at the D1 level in college. So, I mean, Brett Nichols,
good coach.
He's a really good coach. Really great interview as well.
Yep. But, especially when the band's right behind you,
Yeah. You know what?
I'm never going to let you live that one
I
out.
know you're not.
But, no, he is a fantastic coach. And look, Fountain Inn's heading in the right direction.
Yes.
I saw him at 7-on-7s earlier this year. And their quarterback, man, they've got some dudes, and they're going to continue to get better. They're in an area of Greenville County that has athletes. I mean, you talk about a few miles from Hillcrest, right?
Yep.
Hillcrest, a good team, a good win last night for the Rams. They're going to continue to get better and better. Speaking of Hillcrest, Alex, those guys last night had Clover. Yep. You said it, a big win for Hillcrest over Clover, 55-20. Hillcrest had a huge win last year in the playoffs, knocking off Burns. They played JL Man again for the second time last year, played them well. And then, Alex, Hillcrest this season, you lose Avery McFadden, question marks about how you're going to replace that. But let me tell you this. Last night for Hillcrest, if I told you that those guys would have won 55-20, you would have probably said, well, their quarterback, Caleb Sutton, would have had a big night, right?
No,
well, Caleb Sutton did not dress last night.
Really?
No, he did not.
Okay.
Jackson Free, class of 2027, who I saw at Dorman in a scrimmage a few weeks ago, who's a really good up-and-coming quarterback. had a great game last night. 3 touchdown passes in his first career varsity start. He was 9 of 18, 130 yards, 4 drops. So if it wasn't for the 4 drops, he'd have been, 10, 11, 12, 13 of 18. Playmaker is Jackson Free, straight from the G team to varsity. And I'll tell you this, man, class of 2027, this is one of the better quarterbacks in that class, and Jackson Free was able to help Hillcrest last night have a huge win, 55-20 over Clover. A Hillcrest team that when your quarterback doesn't dress, and Caleb Sutton, who's one of the better quarterbacks in the area, a very good head coach and his staff, and Bennett Swaggart, you bring in a young veteran or a young kid who's not a veteran, who doesn't have a lot of experience, and Jackson Free, and he just balls out. You got to feel good about the future of Hillcrest.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you and I talked to Bennett Swaggart back a couple weeks ago before the season started, Jackson Free was one of the names that he felt was important enough to mention. It wasn't just our backup quarterback, he's going to be pretty good too. It was Jackson Free. He's a sophomore. Just because he's a sophomore doesn't mean that he's not going to get playing time this year. And, Caleb Sutton, while he is one of the most talented quarterbacks that Bennett Swaggart's, seen and has ever had in his regime, Jackson Free is also seems like just as talented.
Well, he's going to be good. He's going to be good. And you said it, just a sophomore. So Hillcrest football
in good hands.
In good hands for the next few years, it seems, from the quarterback position. So a big win for those guys last night. I think Hillcrest is a team that is going to start seeing consistency. They had a couple of really good years, but now that Bennett Swaggart's kind of put this offense and this program on track, I think you'll start seeing more consistency from them. And that's what you've seen last year. That's what you've seen so far in this small season, the short season that we've had in 2024. But big shout out to Hillcrest for a big win last night over Clover. Alex, here's an interesting question. You look at a BHP Greer game last night. Belton Honeypath, a very good team.
Yes.
D1 commits on that team, D1 athletes on that team, rather. 37-7 win over Greer. Greer is in a tough spot. They started the season 0-2. Seems like they always start the season with some really tough non-conference opponents. Will Young, a fantastic coach. He's been there forever. This is his 20th season, Alex. It's kind of a point where Greer fans, we had a couple of them call in last week, text in. They're upset because Greer is losing kids to Riverside, East Side. Obviously Burns is right there, but Greer's just they're in an interesting spot, and them being 0-2 to start the season, not necessarily a huge surprise because they always schedule tough, but the way that they're getting beat, I believe for me, is a little bit of a surprise that they're just getting manhandled.
Yeah, and Cole, I'll be honest with you. If they start the season 0-4 before they head into region play in a couple of weeks, it would not surprise me either. Because they've got Hillcrest and Burns these next 2 weeks, and
Tough.
You've mentioned Burns hasn't looked that great, but we also just mentioned they've got the bye week. They've got their quarterback now, it seems. So, Hillcrest, we just talked about them and their big win over Clover. It's a tough schedule here for Greer. And yes, they do schedule typically these tougher opponents before getting into region play. That way they can really just kind of – and Will Young loves to do this. But
he does.
He really wants to get his team prepped for region play that may not be the toughest region, but then he knows that you're probably going to get a decent playoff spot. But once you hit those playoffs, everybody's tough.
Everyone's tough. The last 2 weeks, Greer has been outscored 80-7. You talk about just a monstrous statistic. 80-7 the last 2 weeks. Boiling Springs in week 0. And then obviously last night a loss to a very good BHP team, Alex. They're you mentioned it. Next 2 weeks, it's not going to get any easier. These first 4 games for Greer, they're going to be tough. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. Put a bow on hour number 1. Your phone calls, your text messages, thoughts on last night's game. We will creep into hour 2 and start looking ahead to next week's games. You can text the show anytime. 71307. Start your text with the word fan. Phone lines also open as well. 844-FAN-PHONE. That's 844-326-3150. 663. Gotcha.
Responsible. Be 21.
Your high school football epicenter for highlights, news, and interviews. The Saturday Morning Scramble on the Fan Upstate.
It is the Saturday Morning Scramble. I'm Cole Bryson, joined by Alex Guest to my right. We are live at Ingalls Markets, 10903 Anderson Road in Piedmont. That's 10903. The address is Piedmont. It's Powdersville. Everyone tells me you're in Powdersville. You're not in Piedmont.
There's literally a sign
that says
at
what?
the road that says "Welcome to Powdersville." So.
Well, we were here during the week a lot for Wire to Wire, and we'd say Piedmont, and people would come up and say, "No, you're in Powdersville.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Upstate, where you don't know where you are." But we do know we're at Ingalls. I want to say thanks to Ingalls for allowing us to be here each and every Saturday morning, as well as Founders Federal Credit Union. We're at Ingalls every Saturday, just a different location. I want to let you know, next week we're coming to a city near you. It'll be September tomorrow. Did you realize that?
September, yeah.
How quick did that get here? Next Saturday,
fun.
Alex Guest, 1 week from today, we will be live at 2000 South Pine Street in Spartanburg. Again, 2000 South Pine Street in Spartanburg is where we will be next Saturday morning. So if you're in the Spartanburg area, particularly on the east side, come out and check us out next Saturday morning. Good to be with you on the Saturday Scramble. So many ways to listen. 97.1 Spartanburg, 97.7 FM in Greenville on the free Odyssey app, as well as we're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can watch the show there. So many ways to get involved with the show. All right, putting a bow in hour number one before we run the break here in a few minutes, Alex Guest. You look at last night's games. We've talked about the ones that surprise us. But, I think it's very important to point out that in these first 2 weeks, last week being week 0, last night being week 1, yes, you can put stock into, what happened. But we talk about this at the college and pro level as well. It's super important not to overreact. So, my point is, how do you handle, how do you look at a team like Dorman? Let's talk about Dorman, for example, who week 0 had a big win over Greenville, first half, second half, tale of two halves, right? Really impressive first half by Dorman. Second half, they let Greenville back in it. Greenville took the lead. So you feel good about Dorman out of that game. Then they go to Grayson. Grayson's a D1 team. We all know how good Grayson is. They go down there and get boat raced last night. That's kind of my point. You have to – it's okay to analyze early games in the season, right? But at the same time, I don't think you put – as fans, I don't think you need to put as much stock. For example, Dorman's a good example. Burns is a good example. They kind of found themselves last night, even in the loss, 0-2. You look at that record, you say, oh, the sky's falling. But I saw Burns last night play a really good football game against a really, really good Irmo team. That's kind of my point is – you can't always overreact to these first two games.
Yeah, how's it spelled? RELAX. Oh, relax. I mean,
that's right.
Yes.
You telling Burns fans to relax after going 0-2 is easier said than done.
Yeah, trust me, I know. But the old adage, what's the old adage? Teams typically will improve the most between their first game and their second game. Sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes it takes a couple of games to really get into a rhythm and get going. But, I mean, here's the thing. You've played 2 games.
Sure.
It's really difficult to be able to tell what you have when you've only played 2 games against opponents that you've played. It's not come talk to me if we're 6 weeks into the season and Burns is 0-6, then we'll talk.
It's so much different this year as well with these non-region games actually mattering, right? Last year they didn't.
Yeah.
So you do obviously want to win them. I'm not saying you'll never hear me say don't emphasize winning.
Yeah.
I'm just saying sometimes fans really overreact to games, and that's just part of it, right? That's fans being fans.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a lot of fun. As you said, as the weeks go on, we get a little bit more sample size of who teams truly are. Let's go to the phones. 844-FAN phone, 844-326-3663 is the way you can get in touch with the show. It's the Renewal by Anderson of the Carolinas fan phone where Big Kev wants to talk some, I would assume, Chapman Panthers football. Is that right, Kev?
These two here, we punched each other in the face for most of the first half, just kind of punching each other back and forth. Somebody got to take the lead, but they came with that option, man, that wing tee, and they don't nobody play against it all the time. So when you do play against it, it's gonna give you trouble till you get it under control and get things where they got to go.
Sure.
So got it under control by the end of the first half. They was getting upfield. We stopped the middle run and we stopped getting outside. The next thing you know, we warmed down, man. We wouldn't stop running the ball. We wouldn't stop going at them. And we finally just warmed down in the fourth quarter and took over and got a big stop in the fourth quarter. Then we went back up, and that's what sealed it for us.
It's a game that I picked St. Joe's to win, Big Kev, and I did hear about it, from those Chapman Panther fans last night. Not just the fans, but Chapman Panther coaches weren't excited that Cole Bryson picked St. Joe's to win. The Panthers proved me wrong, and I told Harry Cabanis last night, look, if you need me to pick against you guys every week, I'll be a rich man. I can do that. I can make that work.
That's man. We had to go get it last night, bro. But we got a gauntlet of a serious schedule the next few weeks. So we got this win. We're celebrating for a little while, man, and then be back to business on Monday. Going to get them boys across the water over there behind Walmart over there.
The Boiling Springs Bulldogs you're referencing.
Yeah, man.
You're right. You turned the page on this one quickly. Obviously, you celebrate the win for Chapman over St. Joe's, but what a big test. Hey, do you think that I wanted to ask you, since you were there last night, obviously firsthand experience or firsthand viewpoint watching that game, Chapman St. Joe's. I talked about if Chapman could get up early, maybe they could force St. Joe's offense, that wing tee, to do a little bit something different than they had to. Do you feel like in the second half when Chapman put pressure on them, you feel like they had to kind of change their offense a little bit, or they just what they were doing didn't work?
Yeah, we just changed it last night. Got a little tougher. We seen a few different things last night. Nothing real big, man. Last night we just kind of buckled down and put it on the O-line last night, man. The O-line got player of the week last night, man. They opened holes and just moved people out the way and took us down the field. They took over that whole game last night.
Offensive line player of the week. I like it. The Hogs getting some recognition. Boiling Springs,
man,
though.
Dealing with me down there talking, man. I got to get a biscuit, either some love, man.
They've got to. They don't get the love, so it's good to share the love of the offensive linemen. But that game next week, Big Kev, I mean, how do you stop a team with a really good quarterback in Lincoln Husky? That should be a good one.
You just go get it. You got to find it. Get him on the ground. At least get him and put hands on him and just let him know you're back. And every time you hit him, just say, man, I'm coming. You better figure it out.
Fantastic stuff.
Because we coming wide open. And if you can get in his head and kind of get him to moving a little faster than you need to, then he may play into what we need him to do. But I tell you what, them boys, that's a good team. They've been together for a long time, all them boys, man. So it's going to be a good one next week. Half of them you probably go to church with now or see in the street or in the store somewhere. So it's going to be some junk talking all week long.
Absolutely. Should be a good one. Kev, thanks for the call as always, brother.
All right, man.
That is the renewal by Anderson of the Carolinas fan phone, where you can get in touch with the show if you were at a game last night. 844-FAN phone. That's 844-326-3663. You can save it in your phone as FAN. That way you can just dial us anytime. We do have Robert Muster joining us in about 8 minutes from now. We'll have Matthew Rochester at 9:20, the head football coach of the Riverside Warriors. A big win for them last night over Greenville, Alex. Riverside's a team in that region, before we run the break in a few minutes. It's an interesting spot for Riverside because they're in one of the toughest regions in the state, obviously, but they've got dudes like the Skinner on the outside, the quarterback, who's a young quarterback. They've got a safety or a defensive back, rather, that's one of the better defensive backs in the area. This is a Riverside team that might surprise some people when region play gets here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've got two really good coordinators in Thomas Wilkes on the offense and Tyson Wright on the defense. So, I mean, Riverside, Matthew Rochester, he's got that team headed in the right direction, especially when you talk about physicality and what you want from a team that has to go up against the Gaffneys and the Spartanburgs and Boiling Springs and those folks later in the season.
Absolutely. So, again, to recap our picks and our records, how we did.
I tried to steal the election.
You tried to steal it. We literally had to have a listener, our good friend Brock Hemrick, correct us on a Seneca score, and Alex was trying to cheat me out of a win. It happens. Alex, you went 20-7, still a good record last night. I went 22-5. In my picks last night. 22-5 puts me at 41-12 on the season, a 77% win rate. The games that I got wrong: St. Joe's, Chapman, Christchurch. They lost big to Asheville School last night. I picked Crescent over Palmetto. You and I both got that one wrong. That was a little bit of a surprise. Let's see. I also got Travelers Rest wrong as well. Emerald got the win over TR. Riverside Greenville was a game that I picked Greenville, and man, Matthew Rochester is going to make me eat crow in about 20 minutes when we have him on the program, the head football coach of the Riverside Warriors. But a big win for Riverside. Again, we'll talk to the head coach a little bit later in the show. Hour number 2, on the flip side, you can continue to get your thoughts in on games that you were at last night. If you have a question or a comment about a game happening in week 2, which will be this Friday night, you can hit us up, 71307. Start your text with the word FAN. Again, 71307. Start your text with the word FAN. Hour number 2 of the Saturday Scramble next.
Welcome to the Saturday Morning Scramble. Scores, highlights, news, and interviews from the world of South Carolina high school football.
Powered by Founders Federal Credit Union, official credit union of the Saturday Morning Scramble, and your local Ingalls Market.
It's the Saturday Morning Scramble on the Fan Upstate.
It is hour number 2 of the program. So good to be with you. I'm Cole Bryson. To my right, Alex Guest. We are at Ingalls in Powdersville, 10903 Anderson Road. If you are in the Powdersville area, want to come by, talk a little high school football, we're here for another hour. So good to see Melissa Level from Ingalls dropping by. She's fantastic. Want to say thanks to Ingalls Markets for allowing us to be here each and every Saturday. We are at a different Ingalls every Saturday morning. Also, thanks to Founders Federal Credit Union for sponsoring the Saturday Morning Scramble. Again, Ingalls Markets as well as Founders Federal Credit Union. Alex, before we move on to week 2, even though this Friday will be the 3rd week of games, it's week 2. This gets tricky, right? However, because of week 0, this is where we are. Then when you look at last night's games, obviously we've talked about several of them. Riverside Greenville was a good one. Again, we'll talk to Matthew Rochester in a little while on the program about the big win last night. Malden Boiling Springs, not the score we anticipated, but still a big win. You know, what's fascinating when you look at these regions, you have reclassification. You have new regions, right, for a lot of these teams. And with the playoffs approaching, and we know that with the playoffs approaching, we'll have 2 divisions in 5A. The other classifications are experiencing changes in the region. New charter schools added, a lot of headlines that we went into the year with. But at the end of the day, we've talked about it several times. The parity in the upstate, I think this year more than ever, is just, I don't want to say shocking, but man, there's so much parity. I mean, for example, 5-10 years ago, you're not talking about Gaffney JL Man being a good game, right? You're not talking that game. I mean, just a few years ago, they played and it wasn't close. So there's so much parity, to my point. Before we move on, I think that the parity is a good thing. Now, I will say this. A lot of the parity is due to, I'm not saying certain schools, but a lot of the parity is because of transfers. And the way that we live in this era in high school football, everyone's transferring here, everyone's transferring there. It's the world we live in. I get it. It happens. There are teams that you see week in and week out who have guys from, have guys from all over the county on their roster. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I love the parity that we have in high school football, but I also think that, like, the transfer from the transfer side of it, I think we're in a crazier era than we've ever been. And it seems to be the wild, wild west when it comes to transfers. The high school league just really doesn't seem to care or police transfers and where you actually live. So while I'm glad there's parity, I think we also have to recognize a lot of that's due to transfers.
Yeah, I mean, we think the transfer portal in college is kind of the wild, wild west. I mean, you look at high school, at least collegiately, there's some kind of, rules and regulations to it. I mean, you're right. You look at these rosters, and these are just pure example, but I mean, you look at the rosters like the Christ Church, the Southside Christians, the St. Joe's. I mean, you've probably got kids from all over Greenville County, maybe even Spartanburg County on those rosters. And, that's where the high school league implements this multiplier rule that, is supposed to kind of help with saying, okay, well, you've got X amount of students from outside of your school attendance zone. So we're going to multiply that by 3, and that's how many students you have in your school. And I mean, it's not necessarily, is it fair? Not necessarily, no, but it's the way that the high school league is trying to fix that parity.
Texter from the 591 says all of the Greer athletes went to Riverside. We were talking about Greer a few minutes ago, and just the first 2 games, if you will, the surprise and the way that Greer has struggled out of the gate. Greer's going to have athletes, but when you talk about the texter's point, I do think the texter, not all of them have transferred to Riverside, but there's a big part of them that have, and when you look at the schools that are right there surrounding Greer, it's tough because Greer's not getting those athletes that they used to have. And when you talk about transfers in high school, a lot of the traditional powers are experiencing down years. I mean, you look at Greer, they're down. You look at Burns, they're down. You look at Dorman, they're down. They're rebuilding, but they're still down compared to what they were. Charter schools, obviously, in the area have a lot to do with that as well, being able to get players from anywhere, no zoning rules. So between the charter schools and between coaches at public schools, bringing kids in from other schools, it truly is a new era of high school football that we haven't witnessed, that we haven't seen. So it'll be fascinating. But Alex Guest, before we turn the page and start looking, I do want to get the scores from last night one more time and run through those. And we also want to go to the renewal by Anderson of the Carolinas fan phone, 844 fan phone. That's 844-326-3663, where Daredevil wants to chime in. What's up, man?
How you doing this morning, Cole?
I am wonderful, brother. Hope you are.
Oh, yeah, waiting on the Clemson game. Hey, I told you my JL Man Patriots would show up.
Right.
They were just a little, just off just a little bit.
Yeah, they were. You were off a little bit on that. It was still a good game, but, you said it last week. That was going to be one of the better games.
A 2-point in OT, that's, you can't get much better than that.
Right.
Now, I graduated from Man, but I'm Greer first and have been for years. I think we'll be okay. We got to get past Hillcrest and Burns. I don't know that there's going to be a win in those two games, but we hit that region. I think the guys will be tested. Young's a good coach. I think he'll have us, where we need to be and hopefully come in second behind Daniel. What do you think?
It's a tough region, and I'm looking at it right now. You're right. You have two really tough games left in non-region Daredevil with Hillcrest and Burns, and then you're at Berea, Travelers Rest, Pickens, Blue Ridge, Seneca, Daniel. There's no doubt. You're right. The region, no disrespect to those teams, but the region is a lot more the Greer. Let me put it this way: Greer will be able to win more games in the region than they will out of region. Which I get it. Like, I understand scheduling tough non-region, but we talked about it earlier. Daredevil with Alex. Alex said it. Greer potentially could go into the region that Berea game 0-4.
Yes, sir, they could. And I listened to some of your game. I'm jumping a lot of games while she's tweeting them.
Sure.
Daredevil scores for anybody that doesn't know by now. Mm-hmm. But Burns figured it out on offense. I don't think Greer can do much with them. But, yeah, when we hit the region, I think we'll be okay, brother. I really do.
I do too, man. I appreciate the call, Daredevil.
See you, buddy.
So they have Berea, TR, Pickens, Blue Ridge, Seneca, Daniel. In that region, Alex, it's an interesting region that Daniel probably will win, as we all, expect Daniel to be the favorite. But to Daredevil's point, outside of Daniel, it's kind of a free-for-all in that region.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Greer, as we've mentioned, has historically, they schedule these tougher games, non-region. They get into the region. They do pretty well in the region most years. They're winning or they're finishing second in the region. But, I mean, and no disrespect to the rest of the teams in that region, but I feel like Greer has a really good chance of finishing second behind Daniel.
They do. That the region, again, with Berea, TR, Pickens, Blue Ridge, Seneca, Daniel. Seneca, I think, will be better than people think this year. Seneca may be a little trouble for Greer, and then they have the bye, then they play Daniel. It's an interesting conversation because, you don't want it's tough as a coach. You want to win those games. But at the same time, you don't want to start 0-4. It's a tough line to walk. And the good thing is Will Young's in his 20th season. He's been there. He's done it. He's put in his time. He's been an exceptional coach at Greer. But while you want to be tested, no coach will tell you, hey, we want to start 0-4. It's a very tough line to walk, whether you're going to schedule the best of the best like Greer has. I mean, again, they're non-region. Bowling Springs, BHP, Hillcrest, and Burns. For a 4A team, that it doesn't get much tougher than that region to a 4A. So, they should be tested. But at the end of the day, we talked about it earlier. You go through the region, that's fine. But when you get to the playoffs, everybody's good. Are you going to be able to compete in the playoffs? If you weren't able to compete in non-region games, are you going to be able to compete in the postseason? That's the question for not just Greer, but every team. It's great to schedule big, tough games out of region. We understand that it helps you get better for the region, but you've got to be able to be competitive in those non-region games is my point. I'm not saying Greer should go beat Bowling Springs, BHP, Hillcrest, and Burns, but in order for me to feel like Greer has a shot in the postseason, they've got to be competitive in some of those games. If you tell me they go 0-4 and get boat raced every game, 43-0 in week 0, 37-7 last week, and you tell me they run the table in region, I'm still going to have a hard time believing that this Greer team all of a sudden has come to life. And it's the same thing with Chapman's region. We talked about this in years past. Chapman has had a very favorable region. People think, and people who do broadcast, internet broadcast, people who cover football, they have this misconception of, we're going to play this brutal non-region schedule. Well, all of a sudden you go into your region that's not good, and all the fans, everybody who covers the team, we're a lot better. We've turned the page. We're so much better. No, you're playing inferior opponents. Like, you've got to be able to look at things from a realistic standpoint and look who you're going against. There's a big difference. No disrespect, but there's a big difference in playing Bowling Springs, BHP, Hillcrest, and Burns rather than playing Berea, TR, Pickens, and Blue Ridge. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're playing Boiling Springs, BHP, Hillcrest, and Burns, you mentioned it earlier. They've lost they've lost their first two games by a combined score of 80-7. I agree with you 100%, Cole. You can't go and lose these next two games by an average score of 40-7.
Sure. It doesn't give me faith. Like, you can tell me Greer goes and finishes second in the region. Well, great. Like, fantastic. But when you get out of region and you go back into the playoffs, what are you going to do in the playoffs? And that's the world we live in. You have to perform in the playoffs. You have to perform in the postseason, right? It's on every level. So it's a fascinating conversation to be had, and it's a tough spot for Greer playing those tough 4 games. All right, before we start looking ahead at week 2, Alex Guest, one more time, a wrap-up of week 1. Here are scores from last night. It's not just some scores. It is a full list of scores from week 1.
Where do you want to start, Cole?
Let's start right at the bottom.
Great.
Start at the bottom.
We'll start at the bottom, work our way up. Whitmire, 30-21 winner over Spartanburg Christian. 96-41-30 win over Ware Shoals. Dixie gets a 10-point 34-24 win over Fox Creek. Fairfield Central goes into Union County, knocks off the Yellow Jackets 52-6.
Hold right there for a second.
We're holding
52-6. Fairfield Central, big win.
Yep.
Alex, Union County, first-year head coach in Quinton Isom.
Yep.
It's going to be tough. They have a tough schedule. You know what? You want to believe, you want to feel like they're going to be able to win some games this year. But, man, they at the end of the day, new coach. Again, I want people to understand it's great. It's fantastic to have a new coach. But at the end of the day, you got to have the dudes. You got to have the guys to go out and compete. And Union's in a very tough spot.
Yeah, and look, Cole, I mean, Union has not had a winning season since the 2020 COVID shortened year. They were 4-2 that year, but realistically, Union is really kind of fallen on some hard times right now. And Brian Thompson, who just his last season at Union was last year, but he came in, and in 2018 he took the team to 10-4. 2019 they were 9-4, and then from there they've seen 1 and 2 wins. So, I mean, realistically, yeah, you're right. They've struggled. They have not performed their best over the past several seasons, and that's something that Quinton Isom, he's going to have to come in, and he's really going to have to make a culture change to get something going.
It's going to be a tough road for them. Alex, will you get the headset ready for Coach Robert Mustard, the head football coach, joining us here in just a few moments, the head football coach at Powdersville. Speaking of Powdersville, that's where we are, 10903 Anderson Road in Piedmont. But every week we come here, we're told, look, you're in Powdersville, not Piedmont. So we appreciate Coach Mustard stopping by, hopping on with us a little bit this morning, talk some high school football in just a few moments. I want to say thanks to Ingalls as well as Founders Federal Credit Union for allowing the Saturday Scramble to happen each and every Saturday morning right here on the Fan Upstate. I'm Cole Bryson. He's Alex Guest to my right. Coach Mustard, can you hear us okay?
I sure can.
Coach, we appreciate you being here. I know for head coaches, not a lot of sleep that happens on Friday nights. I don't know what you guys do in particular at Powdersville, but, a lot of coaches will review film right before, they go to bed. Is that what you guys do as well?
That is what we do. There's some sleepless nights. Certainly.
Good Saturday nap coming, right?
There's going to be one of those, definitely. My wife is out of town, and my dogs have been boarded, so I'm hoping they're a little worn out when I go pick them up here in a little bit, and it's time to get right back into bed.
He's the head football coach of the Powdersville Patriots, head coach Robert Mustard, joining us on the Saturday Scramble. Coach, we appreciate you coming out, spending a few minutes with us.
Sure.
A very tough opponent last night in Abbeville. We talked earlier, though, the way you guys played them, a high-scoring game. Obviously, a disappointment to lose any game, but, man, as a coach, you kind of have to feel proud of the way you guys played them.
Oh, man, listen, it is I tell you what, man, I mean, there's people that have been in this business certainly a whole lot longer than I have. Combined being a head coach and an assistant coach, just coaching in general, this is my 21st year, and I would say the first 20 years, this guy right here is not finding a bunch of moral victories. Yeah. Just couldn't bring myself to it. I think the older you get, or at least, the older I've gotten, and I guess a little more seasoned, you got to find positives in things.
Sure.
And here's the deal, and I have not apologized to my coaches, not apologized to my players, and I'm not going to for setting up what I think is a very, very good non-region schedule.
Absolutely.
There's some schools, and listen, just because this is my philosophy or the way we do things doesn't mean it's right for everybody. But
sure.
I mean, we could try to find some schools to go out there and get an automatic win. I think that you want to be challenged going into the non-region. I mean, going into region play and feeling like you have seen the best teams you could have put on that schedule, and I think that's what we've done. And we've had 2 tough ones in a row. Now we can't let that turn into 3 and 4 and 5
sure.
and stuff. So it's time to snap out of it. But we're learning stuff, about each other. And as a team in general, day in and day out, man, we've got a great group of kids. We just need to keep them healthy.
Coach, you talk about that tough non-region schedule. We were just talking about that a few minutes ago with Greer. Different teams have different philosophies, and different coaches have different philosophies on how they schedule those non-region. You guys, Seneca, Abbeville, Wren, Pendleton, Broome, pretty tough non-region stretch. And then you go into region, Southside Christian, Christchurch, Palmetto, Carolina, St. Joe's, a tough region there as well. You scored 34 last week against an improved Seneca team, 43 last night. Even though you're 0-2, you feel like this offense, talk about them, you feel like they're starting to, not starting to, but in the first 2 weeks have really put some good play on tape.
They have, and they've gotten better, and that's what you want to see. Last week, I felt like the first quarter, third quarter, and the fourth quarter that we, offensively we looked real good. I felt like defensively we looked pretty good all the way through, with the exception of play here, play there.
Sure.
But the second quarter last week against Seneca, it wasn't a lack of effort. It just things weren't clicking.
Yeah.
And that sometimes happens. And then last night, I felt like we were able to move the ball whenever we wanted to. And we were not playing from behind the sticks too much like the week before. But, just overall, man, I love these kids. Wouldn't trade it for anybody else's kids. And they're going through a test, and we've been on the other side of it, where everything happens to go right for whatever reason. You can't figure that one out too. You're like, man, what's going on? And, but man, you live to play another day, and you're lucky to play another day. And the guys that we got that are, in it and they're healthy, we're going to move on. We got a game against Wren next week.
You certainly do. We're talking to Robert Muster in his 13th season at Powdersville, a big game coming up at Wren. Coach, talk about some of the players the first 2 weeks that have made some big plays that fans can expect to hear their names called in the next coming weeks.
Well, I'll tell you, just off the top of my head, so Nasir Waldrop, he's a sophomore for us. That kid had an exceptional night last night. We had a chance till the very end last night. It ended up being kind of a slow starting game, and then as the game went on, and the last few minutes looked like a trap meet. I mean, it was, score by both teams. But, I mean, he had 2 huge kickoff returns that he brought down probably like to the 15 and then maybe inside the 10 on the last 2. And those last 2 were probably within the last – I hope I'm not screwing this up. They might have been within the last, 3 minutes of the game.
Wow.
So he was kind of a shot in the arm for us right there. Kagan Reed, our quarterback, he's improved and improved and improved. I felt like he had a good game against Seneca. I felt like he had a better game last night. And, his decision making has been good. Elijah Huggins, another kid on offense that, he's just a grinder. He's been with us, for a while now, and just he has some big plays. His brother Xavier Huggins. I thought our whole offensive line last night played exceptionally well. They were able to protect our guy. I didn't feel like we had a whole lot of pressure on that. And then defensively, Jacob Matoka and some of these others. I mean, we've got a cast of characters that I'm not going to be able to hit on every single one of them. Yeah.
Coach, we appreciate your time coming out this morning. Before we let you go, Robert Musser, we're talking to, his 13th season at Powdersville. We talk about this Powdersville team. When you look at the defense, especially the first 2 weeks, giving up 35 and then 53 last night to 2 good opponents, what are some things that you can do in the next few weeks before region play gets here? I know that you've got who you've got in terms of the guys on the defense, but whether it be scheme or formations, what do you expect to do defensively to try to shore up some of those large points being put up?
Well, I'll say this. So the team we played last night, nobody's, a stranger to this. Abbeville's a very good team. Well, they do what they do.
Sure.
Which is complete opposite of what we do. We're going to be a spread team, so I feel like here on the schedule, with the exception of St. Joseph's, our last, that's going to be a region game. That's our last game of the season.
Sure.
Everybody else is going to be kind of like us, and then the preparation wise, even though it's not a carbon copy, you're going to be able to, it's not going to be as monotonous of hey man, we got to get in here and have a scout period. This man, can we even simulate this stuff?
Yeah.
And so I felt like our defense really did a good job last night. Our defense has been making teams, I feel like work to score, but it's every once in a while somebody's busted, a huge play, and it might be, who knows what the down and distance is, but it's not grinding it out, score. It's okay, boom, so they just popped one. Our defense has played like really, really well. Here's the thing, and I coach all the special teams, so I'll take ownership of this. We go out last night, and we're in a tie ball game. And we have the kick. We're kicking to them to start the second half, and they take it back for touchdown. That's a hard pill to swallow.
It is.
You just gave up 7 points, and you just gave up some momentum that we worked hard to get back into.
Sure.
So there's a lot of stuff we're gonna have to clean up, but I mean we got the kids and the coaches to do it, and we're looking forward to that.
What do you see when you start the season? Like when you get the group together, you start working on your roster, your lineups, and you look at the guys that you have. You just said we've got the kids to do it, the coaching staff to do it. What do you see on a year in and year out basis, this being your 13th season? Like, what do you identify from the kids that makes you believe, even though you started 0-2, that you can turn this thing around?
I mean, it's just a maturity level. You either got it or you don't.
Right.
And we find out, because it is after one loss, you're like, how are we going to keep this group together? Are they going to be a group that's dysfunctional? Are they going to be a group that's pointing fingers? And we learned real quick that they weren't. After 2 losses, now your character is really being tested. So what are we going to do? You're going to man up again. And once again, man, hey, feel blessed. You've got another game.
Right.
And I, once again, I'm not going to apologize for it. I could have put together a schedule where, hey, this is going to be a win. And then what you might find out is, in the second half, these kids are really upset with me because some of you aren't playing the second half because you're up by a bunch and we're not getting anything out of this game.
Sure.
So it's a catch-22 a little bit, but we're happy. We're happy to be rolling, not happy to be, have lost 2 games. But man, we've got an opportunity.
What do you know about this Wren team you played next week?
They're going to be very good. Their head coach Anthony Freight, I think a lot of them. He does a good job. And Chris Padermo, who is the offense coordinator, I was assistant coach on the Wren staff back when he was a player there. He does a great job. You know, we're going to be excited for it. You know, that's the school that 13 years ago we broke off from, and so it's a little bit more. You know, and I got to tell the kids we treat every game equally.
Yeah.
However, after 2 losses, this is kind of a nice one to have sandwiched in there on the schedule because it's our kids. You typically like get up for this one pretty big, and you know your kids are going to get up for every game. You hope, but this one right here, I won't have to nudge and prod too much for us to remind them who we're playing this week.
Yeah. Coach, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming out to talk a little Powdersville football, showcase y'all's program, and best of luck against Wren. We'll take a break, come back, talk to the head football coach of Riverside, Matthew Rochester, next right here on the Fan Upstate.
and Upstate.
It is the Saturday Morning Scramble. I want to say thanks to Robert Muster, the head football coach of the Powdersville Patriots, for stopping by here at Ingalls. Thanks to Ingalls as well as Founders Federal Credit Union. Ingalls and Founders make this show possible. We're live at 10903 Anderson Road in Piedmont, also known as Powdersville. Want to go back to the phones, 844-FAN phone, where we are joined by the head football coach of the Riverside Warriors, Coach Matthew Rochester. Coach, congratulations, 42-26 win last night over Greenville. I know you got to be excited about that big win.
Yeah, that's a huge win for our program, huge win for our school. Start out 2-0 during this year is going to be huge. Trying to come home next week to get to 3-0 and then get to that bye week and then start region play. So huge win for our team, huge win for our program, and hopefully we can keep it rolling.
Coach, I told another coach in the Upstate last night, I picked against you guys last night. I went 22-5, but you guys were one of the 5 that proved me wrong. I picked Greenville. Obviously, you guys came out on top, so I'll tell you as well as I told the other coach in the Upstate, anytime you need that motivation bulletin board material, that's what I'm here for, Coach. You can thank me later, put the check in the mail later, but it's okay. Talk about the win last night and who made plays for Riverside that the fans maybe that weren't there need to know about. Who are the playmakers last night for the Warriors?
We started off fast. We got the football, went and scored. I think Mikael Skinner had two touchdowns in the air, and I believe Jaden Taylor also had 3 of those touchdowns. So Gideon Murhib, our quarterback, Mikael Skinner, Jaden Taylor on offense with Izzy Lehman. Those guys were huge for us on offense. I can't tell you the stats specifically, but I know those guys had a huge day in the air. We were able to be successful on the ground, which kind of opened up that run game. And then our defense played lights out. I know Owen Downs on that defensive side, Alvin Martin, Zacharias Martin, Jack Merriman. I mean, those guys just fly around each week. Have been phenomenal for us on defensive side of football, and were a huge contribution to our win last night.
A big win for the Riverside Warriors, 42-26 over Greenville. They're 2-0. We're talking to Matthew Rochester, the head football coach of Riverside. Coach, what have you seen out of your quarterback breaking in a new one this year that that's impressed you in these first 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah, been super impressed. He's a young kid, just a 10th grader, but he's shown vast improvement. I think a lot of times these days it's hard to coach some kids, or it's hard to coach them hard. And he's a kid that loves to be coached. He made one mistake last night, comes to the side, he wants to be coached, wants to know what to do, how to fix it, and he puts us in really good situations. A lot of times you're going to have a bad play, and he keeps us, another chance, because it's a chance to live another down. So really smart with the football. He knows his weapons, and he knows where to get the football, and has done a great job with our offensive coordinator, Coach Wilkes.
Coach, you talk about this week's matchup. I know you guys probably hadn't had a ton of time to look at film yet, but you have Christ Church coming up in week 2 on Friday night. Christ Church, a team that's 0-2. What do you know at this point about this Christ Church team?
Coach Hatfield does a great job with those guys. They are in smaller classification, but they always usually are coached really well. They do have some really good skill kids. Jude Hall, and I know they have a really good receiver that's got a couple D1 offers. Those guys are going to be guys we have to watch. But again, I think we just got to keep doing what we do. We got to definitely eliminate our penalties. That's one thing that we got to get done before we get to region play, because our region is going to be, one of the toughest in the state. Yeah. And we got to find a way to, get every inch out of our team. So cutting those penalties and then just keep continuing what we're doing on offense and defense.
Coach, we appreciate you taking time to join us for a few minutes this morning. Congratulations on the 2-0 start. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate what you do for high school football.
Absolutely. That's Matthew Rochester in his 4th season. Great head coach over at Riverside. A great start, Alex, 2-0. Those guys, man, they have a chance to go 3-0 this week. That could be a really good start. They have to bye after that. Then they go into the region and play with Dorman. But, man, this first part of the schedule sets up nicely for Riverside.
Yeah, and Cole, I was at the Fountain Inn game last week. I was talking to one of the assistant principals at Fountain Inn that actually came from Riverside when Fountain Inn opened, and she was kind of keeping up with that game of Riverside last week, and she was very excited for Matthew Rochester. So, I mean, it spans across all of Greenville County, really,
Sure.
when you see a Greenville County school doing really well. But, I mean, Matthew Rochester, you heard it there. He's a great coach. He's a great just really knows what it takes to win games and to do it at a high level. And I mean, he's got Christchurch this week. You just heard him talk about it. It's a little bit different of an opponent for them, but Quinn Hatfield always has Christchurch ready to go. Yeah, they've had a couple of tough games to start the season, but against very tough opponents. And so I'll be interested to see how that one turns out.
Yeah.
I think Riverside, I mean, probably going to end up picking Riverside. But
Should be a good one.
Should be a really good game next week.
We will take a break. Come back. It's the final break. We will look at next Friday's games. On the other side, it's week 2 in high school football. We'll get your thoughts, predictions as well. 71307. Start your text with the word fan. This is the Saturday Scramble brought to you by Ingalls and Founders Federal Credit Union.
In Upstate.
Putting a bow on this week's Saturday Scramble. We're live at 10903 in Anderson Road, 97.1 Spartanburg, 97.7 Greenville, anywhere in the world on the free Odyssey app. So good to be with you this morning. I'm Cole Bryson, joined to my right by Alex Guest. Alex, let's look ahead. It's time to turn the page on week 1 and look at week 2. We have some really good games, 31 games total. A quick reminder, I went 22-5 last night on my picks. Alex, not a bad night for you either, 20-7. You're 38-15 on the season. 22-5 last night put me at 41-12 on the season. Again, I got 5 wrong last night. St. Joe's, Christchurch, Crescent, TR, and Greenville. This week, though, when you look at week 2, man, what a slate, 31 games total. There's some good ones on this, Alex, but, man, trying to find the best one's tough because there's a lot of really good games. I'll start with Greenville-Gaffney. Gaffney coming off of a big win against J.L. Mann. Greenville coming off of a tough loss to Riverside. I don't know that Greenville will be able to match up size for size as well as speed for speed when it comes to Gaffney. My early lean here is Gaffney big. No disrespect to Jay Beauchal, but we all know when it comes to Greenville-Gaffney, we'll see who the real G is next week because I think this game could get out of hand.
Yeah, I agree with you, Cole. I agree with you. I think that this game could be I think it could go one of two ways, honestly. I think realistically, I'm with you. It could go Gaffney big, knows it, no disrespect to Greenville. Or I think Greenville can really figure out what has gone wrong for them the last 2 weeks, and Gaffney and Greenville stay close, and it end up being a field goal game for lack of really any kind of other analysis.
Dorman, Greenwood on Friday night. Maybe Dorman can get back on track. That'll be an interesting one. Hillcrest Greer, man. Hillcrest has come out of the gate. We talked about the big performance last night by Jackson Free, sophomore quarterback. Just an incredible night. 3 touchdowns, a really good night for him. Hillcrest is a good football team with a lot of talent, and another tough one for Greer, so that one should be a lot of fun. How about Daniel J.L. Mann? Maybe this is the game of the week. J.L. Mann coming off a tough loss to Gaffney, looking for some revenge, Alex.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw me highlight it there. I think that's going to be my game of the week.
Yeah, it's going to have a good chance to be mine, too.
I think Daniel, I mean, we know what Daniel is. We know what Daniel has, and they historically are a really, really good football team year in, year out. J.L. Mann coming on the up and up here the last couple of years. Obviously, we know what J.L. Mann was able to do last year, just falling a few plays shy of playing for a state championship game, and we saw what they did. Of course, Midland Valley last week, not a Daniel team, but we saw what they did with Gaffney last night. I mean, Gaffney's very physical, very fast to the ball. They swarmed the ball, and J.L. Mann was still able to make that a 2-point game that had to go to overtime.
That'll be a good one, man. You're right. Daniel J.L. Mann, that'll be a lot of fun, and that's at J.L. Mann, so another home game for the Patriots. That should be a fun one. Scoot Watson trying to get back on track. Malden, Fountain Inn. I like Fountain Inn to bounce back next week. They could have a big night. West Side, Hannah. Two schools that aren't terribly far from each other over in Anderson. Could be an interesting game. We'll see if Hannah can give West Side a test. West Side's just really good, Alex. They're going to be a tough team. Pendleton, Woodmont should be an interesting game. Woodmont had a tough loss last night to Seneca. Pendleton, as we know, is a very good team. How about Chapman, Boiling Springs next week? You know, Chapman had a big win last night over St. Joe's, but the opponent they're going against this week, Lincoln Husky, Boiling Springs. Talking to people in that program last night, they weren't happy with how they played. Yeah. So you let Boiling Springs have a good week of practice off of a week where they felt like they just didn't play well and beat Malden pretty good. It's going to be tough for Chapman. I'm not saying it's a it's a conclusion that Chapman's going to lose, but I will tell you this, Chapman in this game is going to have a lot of things go right in order for them to get the win. Boiling Springs is a very good team. My early lean is Boiling Springs. Obviously, I hope that don't upset the Chapman people, but Boiling Springs is going to be Chapman's going to have their hands full.
Yeah, what is that? The backyard brawl? Is that what they call it, or something like that? I mean,
it used to be a rivalry back in the day,
and I mean, it's still rivalries really never die, right? I mean, so it's still going to be a rivalry that both teams are going to get up and they're going to go out and they're going to play their hearts out, and they're going to play probably one of the toughest games they've played and will play all year. But I agree with you. I think Boiling Springs is just going to be a little bit too big and a little bit more physical than Chapman is going to be able to handle. And I see this game being a good game early on, but I think Boiling Springs pulls away in the end.
Should be interesting. Christchurch, Riverside, man, those guys. Christchurch has started 0-2. We just talked to Matthew Rochester. Things are still tough. Christchurch had a tough non-region schedule, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it would not surprise me if Christchurch starts 0-3 here on the season. I mean, they've already got the 2 losses under their belt. It's behind them. You've got to figure out what went wrong in a 56-28 loss at Hammond and a 42-0 loss last night to Asheville School. But, now they're coming back in and they're playing SCHSL team in Riverside, but it doesn't get easier for Christ Church because they have Riverside next week. And like you mentioned, we just talked to Matthew Rochester, and his Riverside team is really good. They're raring to go, and they're really really going to give Christ Church a tough test.
Absolutely, should be a good one. Spartanburg-Broome. Spartanburg had a tough one last night against Dutch Fork. Like the way they played, their defense was really good last night. 24-7 was the final there. Spartanburg will probably get back on track against the Broome team. They're just better than Broome. They're going to have a tough non-region stretch as well. Woodruff, Emerald. Woodruff, one of the hotter teams in 3A. Alex, those guys have had a fantastic start, putting up some points. Woodruff, Emerald. Emerald with a big win last night. However, kind of got to feel like Woodruff's the favorite going into that one. BHP Lawrence, Belton Honeypath. Man, talking about good 3A teams. They're as good as they come. Belton Honeypath will, let me say this, Lawrence will have their hands full with BHP on Friday night. Southside Dixie, Powdersville, Wren we talked about with Robert Musto a few minutes ago, Alex. Those guys desperately need a win. 0-2, and Anthony Freight and Wren. There's no pushover. That's going to be a tough game for both teams. Both teams really needing that win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think outside of the Daniel J.L. Mann game, this might be my second game of the week. You heard Robert Muster talk about it. This is a game that Powdersville doesn't really need much motivation to get up and go play for. It's this really probably truly is a backyard brawl. I mean, you're talking about a team in Powdersville, a school in Powdersville that they had to open a new school in this area of the upstate because Wren was getting so overcrowded and so big. So it really is kind of one of those situations where these guys may live across the street from each other and they're friends throughout the week, but they get on the field Friday night and they're bitter rivals.
That's right. Carolina Perea on Friday night as well. Polk County Blue Ridge, a little rivalry there. Liberty Pickens, West Oak Seneca on Friday. Palmetto versus Travelers Rest. TR looking to get things back on track. Southside Christian versus Anderson Christian. St. Joe's takes on Mountain View. Alex, Mountain View Prep rolling. They're 2-0. Yep. They've put up a lot of points. They're a really good team and probably, in my opinion, a favorite in this region.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, for me, a little bit of a surprise, but at the same time, you're talking about a really well coached or a great coaching staff over there. You got Gray Ramsey as the head coach and the team's the school's inaugural season. So Mountain View Prep really has it rolling, and it'll be interesting to see what they do throughout the rest of the season.
They had a big win last night, did Mountain View Prep. We talked about that earlier. York, Union County, Friday night. Union County, man, the road only gets tougher. York's a very good football team, and that one's going to be tough. Blacksburg back in action. They were off last night, Alex. They have Cherville. And you know what? Blacksburg, they have a chance to go 2-0.
Yeah, absolutely. Cherville, I mean, coming down from North Carolina, and that's kind of the battle of the Iron Cities, I guess. Blacksburg is dubbed the Iron City. Cherville, their mascot, is the Iron Men. So,
I like Blacksburg Friday night, man. I'm high on this Blacksburg.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're going to have a really good season under Josh Batchelor.
I'm telling you, they've got some guys, and they're going to be. They might be a surprise. I know, in that region, it's different every year, but I like Blacksburg. Chesney Walhalla on Friday night as well. Newberry Clinton. That should be a really good game on Friday. Yeah. That one's at Newberry in Region 4 3A. Landrum Ware Shoals on Friday night. Abbeville versus Batesburg Leesville. Whitmire goes to Mid-Carolina. Greenwood Christian has, I want to say it wrong after you say it, Alex.
Eau Claire.
See, I would have said it wrong. And then Camden Military has Spartanburg Christian.
Clearwater.
Where is Eau Claire?
It's down in the Columbia area.
Is it?
Yeah, down towards that area.
How about that? Again, a lot of good games last night. We appreciate Matthew Rochester for joining us on the program. Really appreciate Robert Muster for coming out. Burns, they weren't on that schedule. Why weren't they on the schedule, Alex? You forget to put Burns? No,
they
have a bye week.
They might get a win.
Although they won't lose. They will not lose, that's for sure, this week on Friday. Burns 0-2, going back to Burns. Last night, tough loss at Irmo. I'll say this, Burns played well, even in a loss. They did not play well week 0, in my opinion, at T.L. Hanna. A lot of self-inflicted inflicted wounds in week 0 against Hanna. But, Alex, I saw a Burns team last night from week 0 to week 1 that looked like a different team. They played really well. A lot of that, in my opinion, had to do with Kane Rogers, the new quarterback for the Burns Rebels. He had a fantastic game last night. Big shout-out to Kane Rogers, who looks to be who Burns – I don't know who they're going to go with. If Zy Landrum comes back healthy, he was the starter coming into the season. I'm not a coach. I don't know what the coaches will do. I'll give you my opinion. My opinion is Kane Rogers should be the quarterback. Zy Landrum is too good of an athlete not to have on the field. Zy Landrum needs to be touching the ball a good bit. I think with Kane Rogers and Zy Landrum, Burns could be really explosive. And Talik Dawkins has been really good offensively. We know that their stud running back, Trey Segura, he's gotten some rough news over the past few days, so he's going to be out for a while. But, man, I tell you this, I was so impressed with Kane Rogers. On the Irmo side of things, that was a good football team in Irmo. I'm telling you, man, they're star-studded. A game away last year from playing from the 4A state championship and the loss to South Florence. They're very good. But Burns is interesting. We had a texter early in the first hour asking about Burns and Reggie Shaw and the coaching situation. Burns fans not happy. We get it. They're 0-2. Burns don't like going 0-2. Burns fans expect championships, and we know that it's been a while. But they're a team that is having to play every game on the road this year. It's going to be interesting to see how this team progresses because they do have even though they had a lot of guys leave and graduate, Alex, they still do have the talent to win some games. And so they're going to have some big games coming up, some really big tests.
Yeah, and, we talk about that non-region schedule for Burns. It's a tough non-region schedule. It's really just a tough schedule altogether for the Rebels this year.
It is.
Especially when you're having to play on the road every game. But, this off week, and they always say teams improve the most between their first game and their second game. And I think you saw that last night. But this bye week really comes at a really convenient time for Burns.
Follow us on Twitter during the week, on X, if you will, at Fan Scramble. At Fan Scramble is where you can find the show on Twitter. We'll see you next week as we will be live on Pine Street in Spartanburg. We're coming to your city as today we're live in Powdersville. I want to say thanks to the folks at Ingalls as well as Founders Federal Credit Union. Alex Guest, thank you to my right. Always a fantastic job. And Ben Pittman, the producer, back in the Ingalls Market Studios. Appreciate Ben on the ones and twos today. We'll see you next week in Spartanburg.